It's the 22nd of June 1944, and this is the military town of Koshtovnist on the Dvina River west of Polotsk in Byelorussia. The early morning stillness was shattered by a massive Soviet artillery barrage along the entire front. This town is occupied by a company of Fusiliers in what was a quiet sector behind the front line. Hauptmann Posner, the company commander, was hosting his battalion commander, Major Peltz, when news of the Soviet attack arrived. Reports indicate that Soviet forces have broken through the front line to the east, and a combined force of infantry and armour is heading towards the town. Scouts may also have infiltrated the forest to the north of the river. Orders are to hold Koshtovnist, but if it falls, retake it. Reinforcements are on the way in the direction of Dvinsk to the northwest. It is now 0900. The weather is dry and warm, with a gentle westerly wind dispersing the morning mist. So, let's take a close look at the map, including the landmarks and objectives. Still looking north, you can see the military town of Koshtovnist in the foreground. And if we fly over the town itself and head northeast, over some marshes to one of the objectives, known as the Kremlin Woodyard, in the northeast corner of the map. And if we pan round to the east, these woods are the expected area of attack for the Soviet forces. Continuing to pan round, we're now looking to the south. There's the town again. More objectives coming up. Anna's farm and some trenches. Now we are heading west whilst looking south. The major objective is the army barracks and the town centre of Koshtovnist itself. Further objectives, heading west, are some outlying farms and some trench systems which are to the west of the town. Then if we pan round to the west, you see the river comes into view with other landmarks. We're now overflying Ivor's farm. There's a fording point here across the river. And continuing to head west, a large road bridge called Stalin's Bridge. Further upriver we've got the old bridge, where we also find Minsk farm and Luka's farm. Now we're heading to the northwest corner of the map. Marshy area, and then heading back towards the east. Whilst looking west, we're now overflying the forested area to the north of the river, again quite swampy. And we have another objective here, the forest crossroads. and one more objective, which is the Forest Road West. All of this forest is possibly occupied by Soviet forces, probably scouts, ahead of the main body. If we turn to the south again, you can see the river, which pretty much splits the map in two. Looking southeast, there's another bridge across the river here, known as Creek Bridge. And then we're heading back east towards the Kremlin Woodyard again, with plenty of marshes and open farmland. Okay, before we start the scenario, there's just a couple of things I'd like to explain, mainly around how this game's going to be played. I'll be playing it on the Iron mode setting, which I play all of my games on, and I'll be playing the part of the German forces, and the AI will be taking control of the Soviet forces. However, I'll also be playing the hard cat rules, which I always use, and I'll leave a screenshot of the hard cat rules themselves at the end of this little piece, so that you can pause it and read them at your leisure. But to summarise how the hard cat rules work, they severely restrict what the player is allowed to do, predominantly around C2, command and control of their forces, and this enables the game to be played on more of a level playing field when you're fighting against the AI. For those of you that play combat mission, you will know that when you're playing against the AI, generally the AI itself is quite restrictive, especially when attacking. It's better when defending, but certainly I've found that when I use the hard cat rules, it evens the game a lot more, and the AI is more of a challenge, even when you're defending against an attacking force. The reason for this is that the hard cat rules really do encourage the player to keep their forces within C2, and if you don't do that, individual units outside of C2 are really quite restricted as to what they are able and unable to do. Additionally, information such as hit text has to be removed, so I've removed that particular option in the game settings, so I won't be able to tell what damage has been caused if I hit a Soviet piece of armour. Also, you are not allowed to select targets as the player. You have to leave the AI, even for your own forces, you have to leave the AI to select its own individual targets. There are also restrictions around movement, especially when units are out of C2, and there are other limitations and restrictions around artillery fire and mortar fire. But as I said, I'll leave you to peruse those particular rules at the end of this piece, and I do strongly suggest that you give these excellent hard cat rules a go yourself. You can even play against another person using the hard cat rules, but obviously it does rely on honesty on both parties, but it is really does make it a much more challenging and much more enjoyable game when you're playing against the AI if you do use these hard cat rules, so I would thoroughly recommend you give them a try. Okay, let's have a quick run through of the forces at the start of the battle. The company commander, who, as previously mentioned, is Hauptmann Posner. He has positioned himself in the main church in Koshtovnist town centre, and you can see he's positioned 3 platoons, his full complement there of 3 platoons, either around the town itself or up towards the northwest of the map, covering the forested area. And as already mentioned, he has been visited by his commander, the battalion commander, who is Major Peltz. If we select him, you get to see the entire force here. He has brought some additional forces with him, which we will cover shortly. But if we go back to the company, the Fusilier company, 1st platoon is commanded by Oberleutnant Herter, and his 1st platoon has been positioned in and around Anna's farm and the trenches to the east of the town centre. They are probably going to face the initial attack by the Soviet forces, who are expected to be approaching from the east through the woods and forested area to the right hand side of the map as we look. And as you can see, Anna's farm and the trenches are one of the Soviet objectives, so that's why 1st platoon has been placed in the trenches there. If we then look at 2nd platoon under the command of Oberfeldwebel Luft, he has split his forces either just north of the barracks or in the farmland beyond that, and they are not only covering the north of the town but also a possible avenue of approach through the and from the forest road west at the top of the map at the north, where Soviet forces could possibly also be approaching. The final and 3rd platoon are commanded by another Oberfeldwebel, that's Oberfeldwebel Hansgen. He is the least experienced of the platoon commanders, and his forces, or his platoon, has been positioned in the northwest of the map, and their job is to sweep through the forested area to flush out any possible Soviet scouts or advanced forces that have been rumoured to be occupying that area. So 3rd platoon will be sweeping stroke holding the northwest corner of the map, which is also the direction from which any expected reinforcements are due to arrive. If we look at other forces that make up the German side, the battalion commander, who is Major Peltz, as mentioned earlier, has brought, as I said, additional forces with him up at the Kremlin Woodyard, which is another of the objectives. There is a couple of scout teams and a tank hunter team armed with a couple of Panzerfausts. Also to the north of the town is a Panzerschreck team, covering again a possible avenue of approach from the Forest Road West area, and there's also another Panzerschreck team in the town itself. They've been positioned there really to react to any possible thrusts, armoured thrusts by the Soviet forces. Depending on which direction they come from, we will be able to reposition that Panzerschreck team. Stronger units when it comes to anti-tank, we have a couple of Stug 3Gs. One has been positioned and is on a hold or pause order initially. They are at the eastern side of the town, and they will be looking to target any Soviet armour that comes from the expected easterly direction. The other Stug 3G has been positioned towards the centre of the map, and again, a bit like the Panzerschreck team in the town centre, their role will be to react to possible avenues of approach depending on where the Soviet forces come from. We also have a forward observer team in the form of Oberleutnant Junger, and he does not have any off-map artillery to call on, but he does have another unit that was brought by Major Peltz, and that unit is an 81mm mortar with 32 rounds of high explosive and 6 rounds of smoke. Now they obviously can fire directly themselves, but the forward observer will actually be able to call upon their indirect fire as well. Other units that we have are additional tank hunter teams. There's one located near the central Stug. Also we have a Zugkraftwagen 8T, which is a half-track with a 37mm anti-aircraft gun on the back. They have been positioned to cover, again, Forest Road West and the bridge across the river at that location. And they are protected from any possible attack through the woods by Soviet forces from the easterly direction by the bulk of the town, as they are to the west of the town itself. There's also a half-track and a Kubelwagen and an Opel Blitz truck, which can be used to, I guess, reposition any forces depending on how strong the Soviet attack is, and if we have to pull out of the easterly objectives. Hopefully there'll be an opportunity to load up some troops at least and pull them back in a westerly direction, awaiting reinforcements who, as I said, are expected from the top left of the map, which is the northwest corner. Lastly, there are a couple of anti-tank guns. Unfortunately, they are only 50mm anti-tank guns, and at this stage of the war, certainly on the Eastern Front, a 50mm anti-tank gun isn't going to be able to do much damage against Soviet T-34s, probably T-34-85s, if not heavier armour. So the way that this scenario has been designed, does sort of limit the initial positioning of your forces. I have moved them within the restrictions that the scenario designer imposed. So the 2 anti-tank guns I have fielded where really they are best located to hopefully get flanking shots on Soviet armour, because really a 50mm anti-tank gun at this stage of the war is not going to penetrate Soviet armour from the front. It needs to be a side or ideally a rear shot. So that's why I've positioned the anti-tank guns in those locations. And that is the entire force, which certainly initially is going to have to defend Koshtovnist and the other outlying objectives at Kremlin Woodyard, and sweep through the Forest Crossroads and Forest Road West to see what they can find in the form of Soviet scouts or advanced units. And depending on how strong the Soviet attack is, we may well have to use the vehicles that I mentioned to pull back some of the troops in a westerly direction whilst we await the hopefully arriving reinforcements in due course.